in George Orwell's Animal Farm, there's a commandment, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. And in Animal Farm, this was meant to be satirical. It was meant to be a negative expression. But unfortunately, nature doesn't believe in equity. There are some animals that are more equal than the others. You have listed these down in your own set of commandments or set of rules, which you call the Serengeti Rules. So let's go there. What are these Serengeti Rules?
So first rule, yes. Some animals are more equal than others. So this is the discovery, ecologist surprise, that there are species and communities that have an outsized impact on the stability and the diversity of those communities. The cool first discovery of this happened in rocky tide pools on the Pacific coast of Washington, when ecologist Bob Payne removed starfish from these pools and saw that the diversity of those pools collapsed. And the starfish are a predator, and it turns out, especially by feeding on mussels, they kind of kept the mussels in check, which would otherwise overtake these pools. And then similar phenomenon has been found, sea otters in kelp forests, large salmon, predatory fish in rivers, all sorts of apex predators, but also things like the wildebeest in the Serengeti, that they're through that process of migration and of mowing down the grass in the Serengeti, they create habitat for so many other creatures, and they reduce the wildfire that happens in the Serengeti every year, which benefits the tree population, which creates habitat for birds and hiding spots for predators and things like this. So there are animals with outsized impact on their communities, and the importance of the keystone species is also to appreciate that when those go away, you're in real trouble. And that if you're going to restore a place, you really got to think about getting the keystones back. Second, and somewhat related, because the discoveries were related, is an idea called trophic cascades, the idea that there's some strong indirect effects that ripple through a food chain. And the best one, I'll go back to the wildebeest example. So wildebeest eat grass, right? But it turns out as the wildebeest rebounded in the Serengeti after these epidemics of virus that would break out over the previous 50 or 60 years, for example, one of the populations that started to thrive were giraffes. You say, okay, wildebeest and giraffes, how do you connect them? Well, it's the wildebeest munching the grass that reduces the fire, which would burn up the trees, and the trees are what feed the giraffes, right? Yeah. So that's a strong indirect effect rippling through the food chain. The third Serengeti rule is it has to do with there's like feedback regulation in these systems. And if you think about it, what determines the number of anything in any given area? So the wildebeest, for example, which had been reduced to small numbers, exploded again, but then they leveled off, and they've kind of hovered around a similar population number for maybe the last 30 years or so. Well, what controls that? And this is a phenomenon called density-dependent regulation. Works kind of like a feedback loop, that when numbers are small, there's a lot of room for expansion, okay? Because there's a lot of resources per individual, okay? And then as those resources get used up and the population gets large, that sort of puts a cap on that population. It sort of hits a max. And the population might then drop, but as it drops, then the resources are more available again, and it rises back up. So this is sort of what keeps things at equilibrium. And it's this sort of feedback, this density-dependent feedback in populations. Those are three big rules. I mean, there are some others, but I think that the overarching rule is that nature is resilient and will come roaring back. Populations are resilient. That's the story of the bald eagle. That's the story of grizzly bears. That's the story of manatees. That's the story of sea otters. These things were knocked down to very, very small numbers, and they've come back really significantly. Blue whales, same thing. So the good news is, given a chance, things can be a lot better, and it's cheap to do. And I think most people want a world with all these things in it. They really do. If they can do it with almost no cost and no inconvenience, they'll definitely vote for it or want to see it happen. But I think it also has to do with our quality of life on the planet. We don't want to see these things disappear. I mean, a lot of these animals are the animals of our storybooks of as children. Can you imagine, a world without giraffes or without lions or without tigers or without elephants? Come on. That would be an enormous failure of humanity.